Good evening. Welcome to Live United. Live United is where we get to share stories about all the great work that's going on here in the Monadnock region. Today I'm joined by Beth Daniels from Southwestern Community Services, but before we start in with Beth here, I just want to remind you that Living United is all about how we give, advocate, and volunteer. And this particular show is one that I think is important to watch, partially because when we think about energy services, which Beth is going to be talking about with us, we don't think about that so much in the summertime. So I'd like to welcome Beth Daniels. Beth, thanks for being on the show with us.
Thank you for having me.
So I just mentioned that we don't think about energy services so much in the summer months, other than maybe we need air conditioning. But we're not thinking about fuel assistance or weatherization, both services that Southwestern Community Services provides through its energy services. So can you tell us about that service and how that all began?
Sure. Back in 1965, President Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty. And with that, we started to see community action agencies kind of sprouting up around the country. New Hampshire has 5 community action agencies. Southwestern Community Services is one of those. And we do service Cheshire and Sullivan counties. For our Monadnock United Way involvement, it really is a focus on the Cheshire County area. The Energy Services Department is responsible for fuel assistance, but also for electric assistance and some other smaller programs. And then our Energy Conservation Department is the one that is involved with the weatherization piece. So both are kind of two sides of the same coin, and the United Way supports us in both of those efforts.
So what is fuel assistance?
Fuel assistance is really a one-time benefit per heating season for income-eligible households. And we really focus on trying to say income-eligible households because whether it's a single parent with small children, whether it's an elderly household on fixed income, a single individual, there really is no criteria outside of the income eligibility for fuel assistance. So we really try to service as many members of as many populations as needed.
Now, is that income eligibility, does that follow the federal guidelines, or is it something local?
It does. It's the federal poverty guidelines, and at this point, we're opening the program each year at about 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. So we are able to reach a pretty significant portion of the low-income population. Last year, we took just under 6,000 applications between the two counties. About 60% of those were in Cheshire County.
Wow, that's a pretty significant number. Now, have you seen an increase in the number of people needing fuel assistance over the last few years?
We have. In the 7 years that I've been overseeing the program, we've seen the numbers almost double. It was right around 2008, 2009, which was a really tough year. It was just when we were really starting to feel the crunch from the economy. We noticed that the numbers went up about 2,000 households, and they've never really dropped off since. It's been that increase steadily. We've seen that each year.
So it's really just held right at about the number of people needing service. Now, you mentioned Cheshire County and Sullivan County receiving services. Does Hillsborough, which is also a portion of, served by the Monadnock region, do they also then have a community action group?
Yes, and it would be Southern New Hampshire Services that would serve that area. So what we do is we serve right up to about Jaffrey Ringe, and then Southern New Hampshire Services takes over with Peterborough. A lot of folks are familiar with the River Center, and that's really the local fuel assistance office for that area.
Oh, okay. Very good. Good to know that.
And we'll do some communicating back and forth if folks happen to come to the wrong office, just so we make sure we steer people in the right direction.
Now, when you say fuel assistance, are you talking oil? Are you talking gas? Can it vary?
It does. It varies. We have deliverable fuels, which would be the oil, the propane, the kerosene, also wood and wood pellets. But we also provide fuel assistance benefits for those who heat with electric, and also for those who rent and their heat's included in their rent. with the idea being most folks pay a little bit more for rent if their heat's included. So that one-time benefit would just be in payment to the landlord rather than a fuel vendor.
Now, as part of a more preventative kind of service, do you do a lot of weatherization with people, and what's that entail?
We don't do as much as we would like. We always say that, you know, the weatherization program, even though it really provides an opportunity for some real energy savings and possibly to allow the fuel assistance dollars to stretch a little bit further, there's quite a difference. You figure we'll service anywhere between 5,000 and 6,000 households for fuel assistance per year in the two counties, and with weatherization, we might be able to get to 100 homes within that same pool of applicants. So the funding is much less, and the long-term benefits are extreme in terms of energy savings. So we like to consider the two programs to be two sides of the same coin. But yes, we do a lot of our weatherization activities in the summertime just because it's easier, especially when dealing with the mobile homes, to get under the belly of the mobile home and be able to get the work done under there. We try to emphasize that the work continues throughout the spring and summer, even though that's not the typically considered the heating season.
I really want to highlight that because, you know, I started at the top of the show saying people don't often think about fuel assistance, weatherization over the summer months, but it seems to make sense to me that, you know, it's a great time to get the services that you need, know that you're going to have those services heading into the winter months and not feel like you're in a crisis situation, to be really more proactive.
Right, and the fuel assistance benefit is really supplemental. The percentage we cover is anywhere between, at this point, about 20 and 40% of someone's total heating for the winter. So getting in earlier, August, September, if nothing else, it'll allow a person to know what their fuel benefit will be so that they can budget for the rest of the year and kind of have a little bit of time to plan. The month of August is when we serve some of our priority groups. Those would be households with elderly members, folks with disabilities, and with small children. So those are the groups that we really try to focus on getting in the month of August so we can get their applications done. They can at least know what their benefit will be when we get our funding, and then we go from there.
Wow, so you're really kind of covering a large portion of the population in terms of the service. And when you do the weatherization, are you doing things like insulation? Are you covering windows? What are the types of services people receive?
It's interesting. In learning more about the weatherization program myself, the process for it is very interesting. Once someone's found income eligible, we do a little bit of research to get an idea of the energy costs of the home. We then send someone out to take a look at the home and make sure that they're eligible for weatherization services. There are a few things that could make someone ineligible, at least for a period of time. Some of those things might include if there are any mold issues in the home, because we wouldn't be able to seal up a home that already has mold. It would only make a bad situation worse. Wet basements, which again can contribute to mold. There's a couple things we look for in terms of health and safety before we get going. But if the house is found to be eligible for weatherization, they go in, they do an audit, and part of that audit is blower door technology, where they really get a sense of where there's energy leakage throughout the home. And then they come back and they model that home so that they can see how many measures they could possibly do and still fall within the criteria for the funding sources. That might include duct sealing. It would definitely include, I don't think I've seen any jobs that don't include any insulation. Occasionally there's window replacements, sometimes door replacements, door sweeps, all kinds of stuff. Anything we can do to just kind of button up the home as much as possible. And the jobs can vary. It really depends on what we get savings to investment ratio on for energy savings.
And again, that's an income eligibility program?
Yes, and the fuel assistance application serves as the step one for the weatherization program as well.
So if a person wanted to access either weatherization or weatherization in coordination with the fuel assistance, how would they reach out to you, or is there other organizations they can reach out to in the Monadnock region that might be a little bit closer to them that they can then access service?
Usually folks would want to start with us by contacting us at the Keene office, and that would be the 352-7512 number, and they can ask for either the fuel assistance program or the weatherization program, and either one will kind of lead them in the right direction. They'd schedule an appointment, and we would mail them a little appointment packet, have a checklist of what they need to bring. That's usually the most challenging part, is gathering the documentation needed. So we try to come up with a simple checklist for people so that they have a little bit of time to gather that. Come in for the appointment, might take about 20 minutes. We will be in touch in writing in terms of the decision about how much their benefit would be. And if they're interested in weatherization, there's a conversation that takes place during the interview as well. That information is then shared with weatherization, so they're placed on the waiting list. So that's kind of the process for actually accessing the program. And then anytime there's sometimes there's other things that pop up. A few years ago, we got to do Stay Warm kits, and that was an initiative through the governor's office, where we were able to provide the light bulbs and some window kits with the plastic for the windows. And so every once in a while, there are other resources that will kind of pop up, and when they do, we kind of take advantage of those as much as possible until they're gone again. So
I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I want to remind the audience that one of the other organizations you can contact if you can't remember Southwestern Community Services phone number is to dial the 211. And I do want to say that, you know, the most calls that come in, especially over the winter months, are related to people in need of fuel assistance. So again, want to remind you that you can call 211. They'll connect you to Southwestern Community Services, the fuel assistance, the weatherization program, but to do that early. Do it this summer. Pick up your phone. If you're thinking about that you're going to be in need of this, do it now. And I'm going to say that a few times during the show because it's something that we kind of put on the back burner, I think, because we're hot right now. Well, we're not as hot as we'd like to be, I think, many of us. But you mentioned too that you collaborate with some other organizations. Talk a little bit about some of the collaborations that go on in trying to meet the need in the region.
Sure. I consider myself very lucky to work in this particular community. I always think of us as kind of Yankees with hearts. You know, we definitely believe in self-sufficiency and promoting that and personal responsibility and those things, but we also understand that needs exist, and we're here to do whatever we can to meet those needs. And all of our partner agencies, we know each other. You know, we collaborate, we work together. I think of Keene Housing Authority and the number of landlord forms they complete for us, and the caseworkers that help folks gather the paperwork that they need to complete their applications. Monadnock Family Services, ServiceLink, they all, MDS, they all, Monadnock Developmental Services, they all provide us with referrals. They'll call one of my team members and just say, hey, listen, if I refer someone over to you, here's the reason why I need to get them to get in this week. I understand that the appointments are booked out, but here's the situation. Is there anything I can provide to kind of help move the process along? It's just, it makes the entire process easier. Just the fact that everyone knows the program exists, but more importantly, they know what folks need to do to access the program. And it's unbelievably helpful when we're right in the thick of things. Yeah.
I can imagine it is. When you think about the work that you're doing, we were talking a little bit off air. What do you feel like the impact is? What need is being met? You talked about there's a significant number of people that you're serving. How does that make a difference in their lives?
I think there's the immediate assistance that's provided, alleviating an immediate heating emergency. If someone has no heat in New Hampshire in December, it can potentially become a life-threatening issue, particularly if that household is frail, elderly, if there's other health issues going on. So most importantly, we're a safety net for those emergency no heat situations, absolutely. But also, I think we would all agree that when you don't have enough money to do what you need to do, despite your best efforts, it creates a stress on the household that I think goes beyond the immediate need. I think the kids feel it. I think they take it with them everywhere they go. I think it affects them when they're in school. I think that by relieving that stress, we're doing more than just alleviating the immediate heating situation. We're setting the whole family up for a less stressful life. And I think that some of our coaching, where we talk with households about it's okay to call someone that you owe money to, whether it's the utility or whoever, it's okay to call them and say, I can't make this payment, but I just sent $50. I know I was supposed to send $100. And just kind of get on that path of a good faith effort with your creditors and people that you owe money to. And then it just sets you up to be a little bit more in control. And we all know the more in control you feel of your own life, the better everything becomes. So I like to think that we alleviate immediate heating situations, but we also have a ripple effect on the rest of the household.
So when you talk about coaching, do you actually sit down with folks, or is someone else doing that as part of the collaboration?
A little of both. The intake staff have really limited time. Usually from September through January, we triple book every 15 minutes in both offices, Keene and Claremont. We also have outreach sites that we go to throughout the winter. So time for the intake workers is very, very limited, so I have to be careful how much I put on them, but they see the benefit of sitting with folks and just discussing exactly those things, coordinating payment arrangements, talking with folks about energy conservation, but also referring to other resources that are within the community. And that's probably, other than the basic application, that's the biggest chunk of their responsibility, is making sure that they're making the appropriate referrals.
I'm curious as to whether you have a story maybe you can share about someone that you've served, or family perhaps, something that did make a difference in that person's life.
Sure, and this actually started with, not with us, but with the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services through Health and Human Services, contacted us about an elderly woman who, prior to them being involved, I don't know whether or not she really had access to a whole lot of resources. And she was a household, a mobile home, who was able to not only receive the fuel assistance benefit, which I think she found to be a little shocking, that she was able to receive that benefit to get her through the winter, but we were also able to provide some weatherization services in her home. So by doing that, we were able to alleviate some health and safety issues. And again, had it not been for the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services calling me and saying, hey Beth, I need to touch base with you about someone, none of that probably would have happened, because without even our best outreach efforts, there's people who fall through the cracks if it wasn't for the agencies that are around us. So when you can have someone who wasn't receiving any services, and all of a sudden you've not only been able to help them get through a winter, but you've changed the structure of their home so that it's safer and it's tighter, and their energy bills go down, you've now made an impact that goes beyond, here's a small benefit for the winter. You've really kind of done something more than that.
Right, so, and it could have some longer term benefit, obviously, because it's probably connecting that person to other services. I'm wondering, as part of this, you mentioned Bureau of Elderly Services, that your numbers have increased over time. Is there advocacy? Is anybody doing anything that says, we need to change this, we need to invest in this, and get people into a safer place? You mentioned that the funding is minimal for weatherization, and it seems like, the health crises that can be occur because of lack of fuel or the protection in your home would be something that people would want to deal with. So Are you doing advocacy? Is our government doing any advocacy? What about the state of New Hampshire or our federal level?
There's definitely been a lot of conversation, particularly over the past few years, around weatherization and how crucial that is. It was right on the tail end of ERA with the Economic Recovery and Reinvestment Recovery Act that there was a boom with weatherization, and there were hundreds of households that were weatherized, which was amazing. But as soon as the stimulus package, as soon as that kind of came to an end, you had auditors that were hired and trained, who also were placed in positions and jobs, and you had folks whose homes were being weatherized. But once that kind of came to a close, it really brought an end to a lot of those things. So there's been some talk, the funding is just, it's really, really tough to get folks to understand that, because the focus is not letting people freeze, and again, there's a small pot of money. Do you address the immediate need, or do you think longer term? And I think that when there's more funding available, the more you focus on the longer term things. You think about prevention and you think about all of that. But when there isn't much funding, you're band-aiding. You're taking care of immediate needs, and that's the best that you can do. Fuel assistance, we oftentimes say it's unique in that, unlike many programs, we start the year, we have no idea how many people will apply. We have no idea what the temperatures will be or what the fuel prices will be. We don't know what our funding will be, usually until about December. So we technically start a program 4 months before we have any idea what our funding will be. And weatherization is even more severe than that, just because the funding is, not only do we not know what it will be, but we do know it will be very, very, very limited. So we all advocate, we do what we can, we talk to our local congressmen, congresswomen, and sign the petitions and submit the data and try to provide as much information as we can so that they know that it's a legitimate need in the community.
And, I want to remind the audience that we see it over and over again, that oftentimes needs are never going to be met from our federal level or even our state level, that it really requires almost that homegrown local effort to really invest in these things. So I'm curious, what are some of your needs? How could the public better support you? We know funding's a need, but how can they better support you? Do you need volunteers, anything like that?
It's interesting. I think that with the United Way funding that we receive, that funding goes into a fund that I call the Warm Dollars Fund. And the primary reason we have that fund is because our program really casts the widest net in terms of applicants. So we do see a lot of folks that we cannot service with a fuel assistance benefit because they're a little above the income guidelines, because of this or that. But we know that there's a real need there. So any donation that is made to the Warm Dollars Fund goes 100% to clients in need. The money comes in and it goes right back out to whatever the need is at that moment. So one thing that I would say, and the public's amazing about this, every once in a while around the holidays or right in the thick of the coldest time of year, I'll get a random card with a check in it. It could be a $25 check from a couple that just lives in Keene. Hope you can use this for your fuel assistance program. We know it's cold out there and there's a lot of folks who have less than we do, And those types of things can make or break a fuel year, because United Way allows me to say yes about 200 times more than I would normally have to say no to certain situations. So anytime anyone's able to make any kind of a donation specifically to the Warm Dollars Fund, I can't even begin to tell you how helpful that is. And again, all of that money goes right back out to assistance. That's it. But also, anytime anyone, the plastic for the window kits, if anyone were to ever be able to donate something like that, again, we would turn around and hand it right back out to folks as they come in for their appointments. Anything that's heating related would be wonderful. We had a small group, knit hats and mittens one year. Another year, a donation of blankets came in. So the community cares, and they kind of show that in various ways. So any way that anybody helps is unbelievably appreciated.
And I know we've seen that even through, before the winter started, we had one of the corporate groups out in the community, Timken, actually did a coat drive. just 100+ coats that came in just in beautiful condition and all sizes for all ages. You know, our community truly does care and tries to take care of folks out there who may be in that need. Do you need volunteers at all, or do you have work crews that go out and do the weatherization? Can people do community service with you?
I love the idea of that. We have occasionally, we did it during the Stay Warm that I was referencing. They not only had Stay Warm kits, but they had volunteers going around to different homes to do some of the things that anybody could kind of go in and get done and kind of be able to just scoot out afterwards. Lately, we've been a little careful about that, only because for the sake of going into someone's home, if you're going to be doing anything with the structure of the home, just for liability reasons, and then also confidentiality. So we've been kind of careful about when and where we use volunteers when it's specific to the energy programs. So again, that the hands-on volunteering is a very cool idea, but we have to be really careful about how we go with that, how we move forward with that.
But maybe one of the things they could do is actually putting together like the weatherization kits for you. And there's probably some things that volunteers really could do.
Yes.
And we have Day of Caring coming up in September, so if there are any
Nice.
teams out there thinking of something interesting to do, maybe a little bit different.
Yeah.
I know I belong to a church and we do hygiene kits all the time for different groups. And maybe we need weatherization kits that we put out there to the public.
I love that. I love that idea.
Yeah. And especially if it's going to that Warm Dollars families, those ones that I think we have more and more families sort of falling into that in between. They're not quite at the poverty line, but they're definitely not in a place of being able to make it month to month without this kind of service.
Right, and that's a conversation I've had with many, many people, where oftentimes if you do what you're supposed to do and you pay your bills, you have no money. You have no money left. And when you begin to add it up between mortgage or rent, and then you've got child care, and you've got car payments and insurance, and you know all of the things that we pay, not to mention groceries and everything else, it can be overwhelming for a household. So on paper, there might be 2 incomes coming into the home, 2 paychecks, sometimes sadly 3 or 4 paychecks. But it doesn't necessarily mean just because someone's working they're all set, and that's the group that you know we really try to focus on when it comes to any of our donation money, just because they are so vulnerable. And if you can prevent a bad situation from getting worse, sometimes that's all that's needed to just kind of turn the boat in the right direction. Maybe they've been able to pay for their own fuel, no problem, until the furnace broke, you know, and that's a significant financial impact on a family, having to come up with $3,000 to replace a furnace. So it's anything we can do like that is huge, huge.
Now, do you assist with something like that as well? That if somebody's equipment is not working properly?
Yep, if we can, we refer out. If let's say someone's oil tank was leaking or something, we would refer to Safe Tank New Hampshire. So we do a lot of that. We make sure that we've exhausted all of the resources, but absolutely we have replaced furnaces. We have a heating repair and replacement program that's actually funded by our LIHEAP fuel assistance dollars. And then we also have occasionally utilized Warm Dollars for something like that. And if it's just a quick fix, if it's a service or cleaning someone needs, that can come out of their fuel assistance benefit. And then if it's something more substantial, replacing parts and or replacing the unit itself, we usually will try to collaborate and combine resources to make that happen.
So Beth, I'd like you to recap the services that you provide and how people can contact you.
Sure. Southwestern Community Services, our Keene office is actually located at 63 Community Way. It's off of Water Street, and I would tell you to just go right into the big brick building, but there's about 6 or 7 of them back there. So we're the one with the glassed-in entryway. We're the very first building. And if you go into our reception office, you'll see that we've got all kinds of stuff in there. We have applications for programs, we have brochures. You can contact us by calling 352-7 875-7512 and just asking for the Fuel Assistance Department. You could also ask for the Weatherization Department. We also have a website, and that website's been updated over the past few years, and although there are no applications on there specifically for fuel assistance, there are many applications and other things that can be downloaded for other programs that the agency offers, as well as income guidelines, contact information, and information about housing and WIC and Head Start and homeless services and everything that we do over at Southwestern. You can find information on our website.
And is it important to say to our audience that don't let fear of not meeting the income eligibility guidelines prevent you from contacting you? Because you do have the Warm Dollars Fund, and you may be able to connect them to other services.
That's right. Well, I'm so glad that you just said that. Every year, out of the 6,000 households that apply for services, there usually runs about 800 households that are denied for services for various reasons. I like to take that group of 800 folks and be able to pare it down a bit, and we do that by accessing other programs. I have a Neighbor Helping Neighbor program that can prevent electric disconnects, and it actually is eligible. Folks are only eligible for that if they did not receive fuel assistance in the past 12 months. We have a senior energy program. We can assist about 20 households through that, senior households that are slightly over income for fuel assistance. The Warm Dollars Fund, and then also just referring to other resources that we have within the agency, and then also with all of our partner agencies.
So that's a really important message, I think, for us to get out there, is reminding people to do it now, not be afraid that they're not going to meet those income eligibility guidelines, because there's potentially other safety net services that you can connect them with, or that you can provide, because there's other sort of streams of support out there. And to ask questions. And if they go to your website, can they see on your website all the different services that are offered through the energy?
Yes, yeah. I have them listed, fuel assistance, electric assistance, I think Neighbor Helping Neighbor, the senior program. I think they're all on there. And then we have weatherization is under energy conservation. So two separate departments that kind of work hand in hand. All that information should be on there.
Now, I also wanted to ask about caretakers of people. Can they contact you to get services for others who may not be able to reach out themselves? For example, the elderly is probably a good a population in need of that.
Yes, and the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services has been phenomenal in that regard. But absolutely, we also have some folks who are homebound. And it is okay, as long as we have written permission from the applicant, it is okay to send somebody in to do your appointment for you. We certainly do some things by mail. We also can do some home visits, but primarily we like to meet with someone just so that we make sure we get all the correct information, that nothing's misinterpreted, and that we're able to kind of just look someone in the eye and say, these are the last two things we need to finish this up, you know. So anytime anyone is having an issue with keeping an appointment because they have difficulty getting there, either transportation or physical limitations or anything else, they can certainly send someone else, anyone who might possibly do their grocery shopping for them or pick up their medications. Anyone like that would be completely appropriate to send to do your fuel assistance application for you as well.
Wow, such an important service, Beth. I mean, it's amazing the work that's going on out there, and it sounds like you have crews that go out and do these weatherization services. Kudos to them, because I'm sure they work very hard in a short time span to try to get things done. So fabulous services. Any last things that you want to share with the public?
I think just acknowledging that what we do for the folks who need the services, who are low income, who need the services, but we also like to think that we're having some kind of an impact on the community as a whole by working with all the area fuel vendors who are amazing, and also all the contractors that we do use for weatherization, our local guys. They're great, and they're wonderful to work with. So in the banks, you had mentioned, yeah, if there's anyone you collaborate with, and I instantly started thinking of all the ways that I don't think I could do this job if we didn't have such an amazing group of people that we do all this work with. So we're doing the best we can, and just let me know if there's anything that you think we could be doing better, I guess.
Yeah, so people can reach out to you through the website by calling Southwestern Community Services. And do you have an email if they wanted to shoot an email to you?
Yes, an email's wonderful because I can see it no matter where I am. bdaniels@scshelps.org. And I really love email, partly just so that I have some sort of a record. I make sure that everything gets done. And again, it doesn't matter if I'm getting out of a meeting in Concord or Manchester or anywhere. I can instantly see it, respond, and if I can't address it right away, I can let one of the team members know that it needs to be addressed right away.
So I know I pried you away from some work today that you were doing at your building, cleaning out things and reorganizing, it sounds like. So I thank you for joining us, Beth.
Thank you for letting me.
And again, I want to remind you, audience, that Beth mentioned the need is pretty dramatic out there in terms of these types of services. And when you give, you volunteer, or you advocate, you make a difference in people's lives, and you make a difference in these 6,000 people's lives that can be served through different fuel assistance programs throughout the region and Warm Dollars funds and all of these kinds of services. So I want to thank Beth. I want to remind you to give, volunteer, and advocate, and I want to thank you for joining us tonight.